thedailymass.com. Experience the Roman Catholic Mass from historic St. Louis Cathedral every day on thedailymass.com. His love, anywhere in the world.
Good evening, I'm Sarah McDonald. Welcome to Issues in Faith. My co-host Jason Angelat will join us a little bit later in the program, but tonight we have a very special episode as we introduce you to the men who will be our newest priests. Joining me tonight first are two transitional deacons, Ken Smith and Francis Offia. Thank you so much for being with us. Francis, could you tell me a little bit about what exactly the transitional diaconate is so our viewers understand the part of this process to the priesthood?
Well, thank you. In the Holy Roman Catholic Church, Holy Order has 3 ranks: the bishop, the priest, and the deacons. And then the deacons, we have 2 wings of that: the permanent deacons and transitional deacons. Permanent deacons are not going to those men who God called to serve in the church, but they're not going to become priests. Transitional deacons are those men who God has called to become priests. So transitional diaconate ordination is a kind of stepping stone to become a priest.
But you've been, you are a deacon, you are in full service to the church. It's a step, usually a year for most transitional deacons to before their priesthood. And everyone is always so intrigued by the stories of our seminarians and those men who will be our future priests. And I want to start with you. Ken, can you give our viewers some background? They may recognize you, some of them, from your previous life.
Yeah, I wanted to be a priest from grade school. When I was in grade school, my sister and I were fortunate to go to attend Catholic school growing up. My parents, when they purchased their home, they purchased a home 2 blocks from our parish church. So we walked to school every day, and we were taught by the Sisters of St. Joseph back in St. Louis. And but I wanted to be a priest from 2nd grade on. I was really intrigued, and I just loved the church, and I loved everything that we had. So I pursued, and I was entering the seminary at Cardinal Glennon in St. Louis after I finished high school. And right at the moment of entering, I chickened out. I felt that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't going to be good enough. And then I sort of hid behind that God didn't want me. He didn't really want me. So, and I went on to do other things, and I ended up in culinary school.
Right. And
I moved here to attend culinary school, and I started working at a wonderful uptown restaurant, the Upper Line, and working for Joanne. And in some ways, that was formation. That was a wonderful formation in a lot of ways. And the evening before Archbishop Amon was going to be installed as the Archbishop here in New Orleans, he came into the restaurant for dinner. And Joanne knew I was a practicing Catholic. So after he finished his dinner, she got him to come in the back to say hi to me and the cooks. And that night we talked and we hit it off. And every time he would come to the restaurant, he would never leave without coming in the back to say hi and to let me know he was there. And I think he was on this show, he was interviewed, and he mentioned a prayer that St. Francis, St. Ignatius prayer. And it was a wonderful prayer. And I asked him to give me that prayer if he had a copy of it. And he brought it, and the next time he came in, he brought the copy in, and I put it in my jacket. And when I got home that evening from work around 1 in the morning, I whipped the prayer out, and I was going to start praying that prayer. And I looked at that prayer, and that prayer was, I can't pray this prayer. This prayer is asking me to give up everything and just
take settle, Lord, and receive.
Yes, everything. All my
prayer.
I'm like, no. So I did like a good Catholic. I stored it in my Bible and put it away. And I forgot about it, and I still was, but all of us, when he was in his transitional period, becoming our bishop and learning his way around, I was getting more and more interested in the priesthood. That started bothering me really bad. But I always reminded myself, remember, God did not want you. And it still continued to bother me. And I started looking at that prayer, And eventually, maybe after 3 times looking at it, that prayer started getting easier and easier to pray. And I didn't want to give up my things. I had a wonderful home, a beautiful home, an amazing kitchen, and a house full of cookbooks, all these fabulous cookbooks that I loved, and a great job that paid very well. And but it just started bothering me more and more. And I talked to him. I started talking to friends about the priesthood, and I think I want to enter the seminary to become a priest. And they all thought I was crazy. But one friend said, you need to talk to someone about it. So I went into work, and I mentioned it to my sous chef, who was Catholic as well, and he was the oldest of 10 children, so he was from a good Catholic family. And he said, you need to talk to someone, and I agreed. And when we finished that conversation, Joanne called down. She would always let me know when someone important was coming into the restaurant that evening for dinner. Sure. And she let me know that Archbishop Amen was coming in that night.
That was a sign.
Yes, yes. And he came in. So I told the bartender, let me know the minute he receives his cocktails. I want to go out and say hi and talk to him. So Gerard let me know, and I just marched out to the dining room, and he was entertaining the vocations director from one of the.
It's even more of a sign when the Archbishop and the vocations director walk in to talk with you.
So I went out and said, Archbishop, what's the process of becoming a priest? And he just laughed and said, you talk to the bishop. And so I made an appointment that night to visit with him, so that Monday, this was on a Friday in the evening, I visited with him on Monday, and after we talked and visited, I went home, and before I got home, Father Steve, who was the vocations director at the time, called me to make an appointment to come in and to see him.
And so the rest it all fell into
history.
Place.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah. Now can you follow that up, Francis, with your story?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because as we know, God speaks to us in different ways, and sometimes He uses human being. I mean, listen to His own story. I think we have similar things, My mom, I think God used my mom to put the idea of becoming a priest in me. Even when I was 7 years old, when I have no idea what priesthood is all about, I made my first Holy Communion, and my mom wanted me to go to the church and join the altar service and serve at the altar and all that, She didn't tell me why she wanted me to do that. After some months, and then she was like, to be good if you serve at the altar, and then when you grow up, you become a priest. I was like, oh. I never thought of becoming a priest, but that was the first time I heard that. I didn't take it serious. I didn't know what that means, and I've served at the altar for a long time as a child growing up in my elementary school, but eventually at the completion of my elementary school, I kind of thought of it, what my mom said to me many years ago, So I eventually got admission to go to school, a high school that is kind of minor seminary.
Sure.
So that was where I went for my high school. But at the completion of that, as a teenager, and all those teenage things and going front and back, and I was like, oh, this is not what I want to do,
Right.
So I left and then moved to the city of Lagos, and that is where everything is happening. Young people want to go to Lagos, live in Lagos, make money and all that. So I lived in Lagos, and I was working, kind of job, I wasn't even thinking of going to college at the time, but at some point, a friend of mine asked me to think if I can go to college. I was working towards that, and then I had to kind of involve myself more in the church and then become active in what is going on in the parish. And then we had this amazing pastor. He's a Jesuit priest, and he loved his life as a priest. He loved his ministry. He loved the people, and
it spoke to you.
Yeah, he really inspired me because I watched him the way he did things, and then one day we got talking. I told him that I went to the minor seminary before, and then he asked me, why didn't you continue? I was like, well, I didn't know if I want to do that. And then he asked me to come to the church. He has a group he called Vocation Group. Young people growing up, he brings them together to say the divine office every day, attend mass every day, young people in their 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay. So I became part of that, and then he made me know more about different religious communities, and in fact, he brought me close to a lot of priests. that was when kind of the second time that the thought of becoming priest coming back to me, and then eventually after many years I went back to the seminary, you know, and that was way back in my country.
Sure.
Then when I finished my philosophy, kind of got more exposed to some things in life, read some crazy philosophers and all that. I was like, you know, is this faith real? You know, I was doubting the faith of so many things, and
but God
I wasn't serious if I should continue, but like I said earlier, God has a way of, you know, He keeps sending people around you to let you know that this is what I want you to do. That is why my favorite quote in the scripture is John 15:16, you know. I didn't choose him, he chose me.
That's right.
So eventually I found myself to study for the Archdiocese of New Orleans.
And here you are.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks you'll be ordained. I think it's so fun, and I didn't want to be too involved in your stories. I liked hearing from you because you hear the similar things, the roots, your parents, people, God continuing to call you even when you're not listening necessarily. So I want to thank you both for being so open with your stories, and I want you to know that me, my family, my co-host Jason and his family, and all the people in the Archdiocese will be praying for you as you prepare to be ordained and throughout your time as transitional deacon. So thank you for saying yes.
Thank you so much.
Lord.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back.
The ministry of Notre Dame Hospice is very important to me and to our Archdiocese. When we read the scriptures page after page, we see Jesus very attentive to those who are sick and dying. We see Jesus very attentive and compassionate to their families and to those who surround them. It is our responsibility to carry on the ministry of Jesus, to care for the dying and to help them prepare to return to their home in heaven.
It's your choice. Ask for Notre Dame Hospice.
Well, welcome back to Issues in Faith. We're back with two more of the men who will be ordained transitional deacons, Zachary Aburu, correct? And correct. David Ducote. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. David, a familiar face to some of our Issues in Faith viewers. Thanks again for giving us a tour of the seminary.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us again.
Of course. Well, just as your fellow seminarians, those who are preparing for the transitional diaconate, gave us their stories, talked a little bit about what brought them to seminary and to the priesthood. I'd like to hear the same from you. Zachary, could you give us a little bit of background and what brought you
Yeah,
to
first
this
of all,
vocation?
I come from Uganda, and Uganda is found in the eastern part of Africa. And my archdiocese is called Tororo, and it's also on the eastern part of Uganda. And my vocation story is not really dramatic. It's kind of, yeah, so-so. Because I say that because, you know, like many vocations, my parents played a very big role, the church community and my pastor. But kind of just my discernment on whether I want to really become a priest or I would rather do something else, it all developed while I was in the seminary. And so I joined preparatory seminary at the age of 12.
Oh, wow.
And that was like, as I use this word, it was like a warm-up place for me to go into high school seminary, and it was diocesan institution of learning. So eventually, after the 2 years in the preparatory seminary, I found that actually I'm interested in continuing to high school seminary. So I joined high school seminary and then spent there 6 years without any problems, and I still found that I think I am being called. And so the process of discernment has been unfolding that way, and the more I stay there, the liturgy, the whole life of the seminary as it goes throughout the year, and the whole cycle again becomes available in a much more relieved way. I found that to be very, very helpful in the way I discerned my vocation. And then eventually, 2012, I went to the major seminary and I had my 3 years there, and almost now, my time of discernment was almost coming to an end, discernment to be a priest. So it was there that I was like really sure now I really want to be a priest and not anything else. And so after graduating, the bishop just said, you know, you better go to New Orleans. And my diocese and the Archdiocese of New Orleans has been in partnership for the last 20 or more years.
Right.
And so we get guys from Uganda, from Toro in particular, to come and be formed for the Church of God in Toro. And so I've been following in the footsteps of those guys, and I like it in New Orleans. I like it in New Orleans, and I've been, I think the environment in New Orleans has been very supportive as to my vocation, and the people, the faculty, the staff at the seminary, and the seminarians have made lots of friends, and all these have been working towards the good of my vocation. So I think generally my vocation story, I would just put it this way, it unfolded while I was in the seminary. So
but you were very young when you were 12, being having that educational opportunity.
Yes, so that's why I say it's not very dramatic.
No, but it is an important point that so often it is an unfolding, and it's a daily discernment, yes, to continue to let God's will be part of your life.
Exactly.
So that is a beautiful story. And so we come from Uganda to Louisiana.
Back to New Orleans.
Back to New Orleans.
Yes.
David, you know, we've talked before, but tell us again, you know, what has your discernment been like to get to this point?
Yeah, my discernment, I would say, started probably around middle school, specifically while I was in altar server. I grew up in Chalmette, and in fourth grade, when we were able to become altar servers, my parents asked me if I wanted to become one at my home parish of Prince of Peace, which ain't there no more since Katrina.
That's right.
But it was that was my parish growing up, and so I joined the altar server program. And I can remember probably during middle school, just thinking as I was watching the priest do what he was doing during Mass, and seeing what I was doing, and really getting involved in the altar service, really starting to think, this is something that was very important to me. And so I can remember during that time, middle school, early years of high school, thinking, one day maybe I would become a deacon. And I said that because I didn't know what a deacon was.
Well, you were right. You are about to
I
become a deacon.
am about to become a deacon.
Yes.
And the reason I say I think I wanted to be a deacon at that time was because the little bit that I did know, I knew that a deacon, at least the permanent deacons, were married, had kids, had other jobs. They had
quote unquote normal lives.
Normal lives. They had all these things I was brought up to believe I had to have. The wife, the kids, the nice car, the fancy house, all those things that society tells us we're supposed to have. And as my sophomore year, I had met a girl, and we started to date. And so in August of 2007, we got engaged. And during that time period, these thoughts of priesthood, religious life, they started to come back. And at first I thought it was just cold feet. I'm engaged to be married, so these things are starting to come up. Of course they're going to come up. So I started to pray about it and asking God to show me some sign of what it was he wanted me to do. And after several months of praying about it and receiving zero signs, or at least nothing I perceived as a sign, I finally got frustrated one day during Mass. And I remember I was kneeling down after receiving communion at St. Edward the Confessor, which had become my home parish since Hurricane Katrina. Just remember kneeling down and looking towards the tabernacle and just saying, God, either you tell me what it is you want me to do with my life, or I'm going to get married, whether that's what you want for me or not. I'm just tired of asking. So kind of gave him an ultimatum. And so sure enough, as I got up from Mass, only a few minutes later, and was leaving the pew, I had two people come to me. One was the mother of my best friend from high school, who was actually going to be one of my groomsmen in the wedding. So she was
very aware that everything was going on.
And the other was my dad's best friend from high school's daughter, who I had grown up with on the family vacations together. And they both came to me and said they thought I should be a priest.
Oh, wow. That was a good answer to an ultimatum.
Yeah, I turned back towards the tabernacle and I turned pale as a ghost and was like, okay, now what? What do I do now?
Right.
So I left very afraid that day.
Sure.
And kept it to myself, didn't tell anybody. And then after about 3 months of keeping it to myself and it just starting to really wear on me.
Yeah, it was a burden you were
It was a
carrying.
very large burden. I finally built up enough courage to talk to my pastor.
And we have to fast forward a little bit into how did you, you broke off the engagement and entered seminary, or was there another point of discernment?
No, that was pretty much, I had about 1.5 years left of college, so I wanted to finish that. I knew I wanted to finish my degree. So I finished that, but during that period, I joined the discernment group with the Archdiocese, with Father Steve Bruno and Father Luis Rodriguez, and started discerning with them, going to monthly meetings. And then after graduating, entered into the application process, and now I'm here. So that was in 2010.
Everyone has a different story.
It's true.
And it's a different path. So I want to thank you, as I did with your brothers before, I want to thank you for being here and being so open, and for your yes to God and to his church, and we will be praying for you.
Thank you so much.
Yes. And when we come back, Jason will sit down with Deacon Chris Zavakis, who will be ordained a priest early this summer. This is Issues in Faith on WLAE.
Why choose Catholic schools?
It was really very paramount to me when my children were going to be going to school that I found a school that had the spiritual side and had that part of my faith that I grew up with. So Catholic school became the only real choice for me.
Get the facts at whycatholicschools.org.
If you want your child to be nurtured not only academically, but spiritually, emotionally, and socially, I would send my child to Catholic school.
And welcome back, and I'm joined with Deacon Chris. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Very exciting, in a very short time, you'll be ordained priest, one of the persona Christi, the person of Christ. Yes. This is this exciting moment, being able to give to the people the sacraments, the Eucharist, reconciliation, being with God's flock. It's powerful. So tell me your journey. Was this always on your heart to be a priest?
Jason, my story starts out very slowly. And in the beginning, I didn't feel as though I was called to be a priest. I was just called to draw closer to God, to love God.
Yeah.
And I think that began at St. Margaret Mary Parish in Slidell.
Yeah, absolutely.
When they started perpetual adoration.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I had a love of perpetual adoration.
Yeah.
Just drawing closer to God and sitting there, open my heart to Him and praying.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about being a priest back then.
Sure.
But God has a way of nudging you very slowly. He
Yes.
did for me. And of course, I was very hard of hearing. I didn't listen too well to Him.
Right.
So over and over, He had to nudge me.
Yeah.
But along the way, I had my own plans. So it took some great nudging on His part.
Yeah.
I think in the beginning, I had joined the National Guard.
Oh, is that right?
And I actually remember being on one of the ranges in basic training and training for, I think it was the Compass Range.
Wow.
Ironically trying to figure out which way I should go.
Right.
But at that moment, I felt as though I should go into the seminary. And I wasn't even out of high school yet.
Wow.
So when I graduated from high school, I entered St. Joseph's Seminary College. And I was still in the Army National Guard. I kept doing that. It was a very interesting combination.
So you're in the seminary, and on the weekends you would go?
1 week in a month training. Wow. That's right, running through the woods with a machine gun.
So what was that like, going back to your company and being like, yes, I'm in the seminary?
Well, you know, they kind of razzed me up quite a bit about it.
Sure.
But time went on, and I graduated from St. Ben's, and I went to Notre Dame Seminary for a year. But at that point, I felt very strongly that I didn't want to live alone for the rest of my life. That's what I was telling myself. Because all through high school, I was very shy.
Yeah.
There would be no way I would come on a TV program.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. But at that point, I hadn't dated very much in high school, and I wanted to date.
Sure.
I didn't want to be alone for the rest of my life. And I thought that possibly I wanted to get married. So with that thought in mind, I left the seminary after 5 years.
Wow. Wow.
And I started dating, and I started slowly developing a career working with people with developmental disabilities. And I did that for 13 years.
Wow.
I started out by working hands-on with the folks. It was a very fulfilling career.
Sure.
And on up in time to run a whole company.
Wow.
And along the way, of course, I was dating, going through all those heartaches and falling flat on my face. As time went on, and it was a lot of time, 13 years of time that I worked with people with developmental disabilities.
Sure.
I felt those nudges from God. You know, have you thought about going back to the seminary?
Yeah.
And I would push it away because I was just having way too much fun.
Sure.
I even remember a priest at St. Cletus on the West Bank. He said to me, "Chris, have you ever thought about going back to the seminary?" No, certainly not. No, it was just far too soon.
Yeah.
But those were the nudges of God that I wasn't listening to. I had my own plans, and I thought that my plans would be much better than God's plans.
Right.
You know, somehow God would bless what I wanted.
Right.
Well, it wasn't really working, Jason. I just, things fell apart. I wasn't fulfilled in my career. And I interpreted that as not as going back to the seminary, but as I should switch fields.
Yes.
Right. And I went to nursing school for a while.
Is that right?
But that didn't work out, and that wasn't fulfilling. And at the same time, I was dating, and there was no way in the beginning when I had left the seminary. I always thought the grass is certainly greener on the other side of the fence.
Right.
Well, it wasn't. I found the challenges of relationships and dating. And I dated some great girls. They would have been great wives.
Sure.
But I wasn't fulfilled in my heart. And all those things combined led me out on a move to another job, the home of Thibodeau. And while I was out there, I kind of encountered my friend who's a priest, and we had a chance to talk every day. And he talked about the things he did every day that a priest does, just normal things.
Right.
You know, look, I baptized 3 babies today. Or I have a wedding coming up.
That's right.
Or I met with the finance consul, and he told me about the kids in his school. And over the course of days of these conversations, as just friends sit down with each other, I fell in love with the priesthood again. And
extinguishing that lie that you would be alone.
Right.
That there is not going to be fulfilling, that there's this emptiness, but there's something beautiful.
Exactly. There's a fulfillment.
Yes.
And a freedom in following exactly what God wants.
You know, I wish we're going to have you back on after when you're ordained. We're going to have you on, and I want to hear more, because there's something, not only I think it's applicable for people who are discerning the priesthood, but just realizing that it's not about where is the grass greener. It's about where is God calling you.
Right.
And I'm so thankful that you said yes to Him and trusted Him, and that you're here, and that very soon you will be soon a priest. Thank you so much for your yes, and we'll, like I said, we'll have to have you back on. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you, Jason.
And God bless you. And that's our program for this evening. We hope you enjoy getting to know our future priests. As a reminder to our viewers, we will live stream the Transitional Diacon Ordination at 10 a.m. Saturday, May 23rd at www.arch-no.org. And from all of us at Issues in Faith, thanks so much for watching. God bless.